text message glowed on my phone screen like a neon sign advertising betrayal. I'm not going to report on where I spend my time. My name is Lucas Mitchell, and I'm an architect. I build things that last. Houses, buildings, structures that stand the test of time. What I didn't build properly, apparently, was my marriage. I sat in my cluttered home office at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, surrounded by half-finished blueprints and empty whiskey bottles. The house felt different now, colder, like the heating system had given up along with everything else. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows of our suburban home in Millbrook, a mid-sized city in upstate New York where everyone knows everyone's business and secrets spread faster than gossip at a church bake sale. "There's no need," I typed back, my fingers steady despite the bourbon coursing through my veins. But there was a need, a desperate, gnawing need to know exactly where my wife of 15 years spent her evenings when she claimed to be showing houses or meeting clients. Because I already knew she wasn't doing either. Vanessa thought she was clever. She thought I was just another oblivious husband, buried in my work, too distracted by foundation plans and load-bearing calculations to notice her increasingly elaborate lies. She was wrong on both counts. I'd been tracking her location for 3 weeks. The shared family account showed her phone pinging from the Riverside Bistro downtown, a trendy place with dim lighting and overpriced wine. The same place she'd been not going to for the past month. Credit card receipts told a different story than her carefully rehearsed explanations. Hotel charges, restaurant bills for two, purchases at Victoria's Secret that never made it into our bedroom. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd been building. Screenshots of location data, photos from social media, receipts, a digital paper trail that painted a picture clearer than any architectural blueprint I'd ever drawn. The evidence was damning. Vanessa had been meeting Ethan Crawford, her coworker at Premier Realty, at hotels and restaurants across the city. Ethan, with his flashy smile and luxury sedan, who always seemed to show up at our barbecues with expensive wine and compliments for my wife's dress. I printed everything, 47 pages of betrayal, organized chronologically and cross-referenced. If you're going to destroy someone's world, you might as well do it with professional precision. The rain kept falling as I slipped on my jacket and grabbed the manila envelope. The Riverside Bistro was only 12 minutes away. I'd timed it. Vanessa's BMW was in the parking lot, right next to Ethan's silver Mercedes. The restaurant's warm glow spilled onto the wet pavement as I walked through the front door. The hostess smiled at me, but I was already scanning the dining room. There they were, in a corner booth, leaning across the table like teenagers sharing secrets. Vanessa wore the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. Ethan's hand covered hers. I walked over slowly, savoring each step. The conversations around me seemed to fade into background noise. This was it, the moment 15 years of marriage would officially end. "Evening," I said, stopping at their table. Vanessa's face went white. Ethan pulled his hand back like he'd touched a hot stove. "Lucas," Vanessa stammered. How did you find you?" I set the envelope on the table between them. "Architecture requires attention to detail, sweetheart. You should know that by now." Ethan cleared his throat. "Look, man, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Open it," I said to Vanessa, ignoring him completely. Her hand shook as she lifted the envelope's flap. I watched her face as she saw the first page, a photo of them kissing outside the Marriott last Tuesday, then the hotel receipts, then the text messages I'd recovered from our shared cloud account. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Interesting reading?" I asked. "I particularly enjoyed the part where you told him I was emotionally unavailable. Very creative." The entire restaurant seemed to be watching now. I could feel their eyes on us, could practically hear the gears turning as they realized they were witnessing some premium small-town drama. "Lucas, please," Vanessa said, tears starting to form. "Can we talk about this at home?" I leaned down until my face was level with hers. "We're way past talking, Vanessa. Way past a lot of things." I straightened up and looked at Ethan, who was studying his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Enjoy your dinner," I said. "Both of you." I walked out into the rain, leaving them with their evidence and their guilt. Behind me, I could hear Vanessa calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I had work to do. The next morning, I was waiting in the kitchen when Vanessa crept through the front door at 6 a.m., still wearing the red dress and yesterday's makeup. "We need to talk," she started. I slid a manila envelope across the kitchen counter. "No, we don't." She opened it and found divorce papers, already filed with the county clerk. Her bank cards were paper-clipped to the back page. "I had them deactivated an hour ago," I said, sipping my coffee. "Joint accounts are funny things. Either party can freeze them with proper documentation of infidelity. You can't do this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm an architect, Vanessa. I plan things carefully, and I always finish what I start. She stared at the papers, then at me. What happens now? I smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Now? Now you get to find out what happens when you try to demolish someone who builds things for a living. Checkmate. But I was just getting started. Within 48 hours, I was the most talked about man in Millbrook, not for my architectural achievements or my volunteer work with the youth center, but for being the husband who'd publicly humiliated his cheating wife at the city's most popular restaurant. The story spread like wildfire through social media and coffee shop conversations. By Friday morning, I'd received 17 phone calls, 34 text messages, and enough Facebook comments to fill a small novel. Half the town thought I was a hero, the other half thought I was a psychotic control freak. Guess which half included most of our mutual friends. You went too far, Lucas, said Jennifer Walsh, Vanessa's best friend since college, when she cornered me at the grocery store. Public humiliation? Really? That's not the man I thought you were. Neither was the woman I married, apparently, I replied, loading beer into my cart. Funny how people surprise you. Jennifer's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her purse. Vanessa made a mistake, yes, but she's devastated. She's staying with us because she's afraid to be alone with you. Smart woman? She should be afraid. The words came out darker than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Jennifer's eyes widened, and she hurried away, already pulling out her phone to report this latest development to the Vanessa support network. That network was impressive in its scope and dedication. Led by Jennifer and fueled by Samantha Torres, another real estate agent who'd appointed herself Vanessa's crisis manager, it included most of the wives from our old social circle. They'd painted me as an unstable husband who'd snapped under pressure, a man so controlling that I'd tracked my wife's every movement. They weren't wrong about the tracking part. My architecture firm started feeling the pressure by the second week. 3 clients canceled projects, citing scheduling conflicts that coincidentally coincided with their wives' membership in the Vanessa support network. Margaret Hoffman, whose kitchen renovation I'd been designing for 6 months, left a voicemail that was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive small-town politics. Lucas, I'm so sorry, but Frank and I have decided to go with a different architect. Nothing personal, of course. We just think it might be better to work with someone who's in a more stable place right now. I hope you understand. I understood perfectly. Vanessa's friends had launched a whisper campaign designed to destroy my business along with my reputation. They were playing for keeps, but they'd forgotten something important. I'm really good at my job because I'm really good at planning. Friday night found me at the Quarry, a dive bar on the wrong side of downtown where the beer was cheap and the lighting was dim enough to hide your mistakes. It was owned by Kyle Morrison, my best friend since high school, who turned a failing boxing gym into a surprisingly successful sports bar by the simple expedient of keeping the boxing ring and adding alcohol. You look like hell, Kyle said, sliding a bourbon across the scarred wooden bar. Feel worse? I admitted. Half the town thinks I'm a monster. Other half thinks you're a legend. That stunt at the riverside? Pure theater. Kyle was built like a fire hydrant. Short, solid, and impossible to move when he didn't want to be moved. He'd been trying to talk me into taking up boxing again for years, claiming I needed a physical outlet for my architectural frustrations. Now he was looking at me like a project he finally had permission to start. You want some advice? He asked. Not particularly. Tough. You're playing their game, and their game is gossip and social pressure. You're never going to win that way because they've got home field advantage. So what do you suggest? Stop playing defense. Start playing offense. I was about to ask him what that meant when Ethan Crawford walked through the front door. He looked around the bar like he was touring a sewage treatment plant, his expensive suit completely out of place among the construction workers and off-duty cops who made up the quarry's regular clientele. He spotted me and walked over with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having been punched in the face. "That's Lucas," he said, like we were old friends meeting for drinks. "I was hoping I'd find you here. Where are you now?" It wasn't a question. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot. What happened between Vanessa and me, it just happened. Nobody planned it. These things, they're complicated, you know? Kyle stepped closer, and I could feel the temperature in the bar drop about 10 degrees. Several of the regulars had stopped their conversations to watch. Complicated, I repeated. Right. And I think if we could just sit down like adults and talk this through, maybe we could work something out. Vanessa's really broken up about all this. She never meant to hurt you. She never meant to get caught. Ethan's smile flickered. Come on, man. Don't be like that. I mean, let's be honest here. When was the last time you two were really happy? Sometimes these things happen because something was already broken, you know? The bourbon in my glass seemed to be glowing. Everything around me had gone very quiet and very clear, like the moment before lightning strikes. You think my marriage was broken? I asked. I'm just saying. I stood up slowly and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed through the bar like a gunshot. Ethan staggered backward, his hand flying to his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. Now it's broken, I said. Ethan's shock transformed into rage. He lunged at me, but Kyle caught him by the collar and slammed him against the bar. Easy there, pretty boy, Kyle said. This is a classy establishment. We don't tolerate violence against the customers. He hit me, Ethan sputtered. Looked more like a love tap to me, said Tommy Rodriguez, a regular who worked construction. Barely even a slap, really. Several other patrons nodded in agreement. The quarry's customers had a very flexible relationship with the truth when it came to protecting their own. Kyle released Ethan, but stayed close enough to intervene if necessary. I think you should leave now, he suggested, before things get complicated. Ethan straightened his tie and tried to recover his dignity. This isn't over, he said to me. No, I agreed. It's not. After Ethan left, Kyle poured me another bourbon and leaned across the bar. Feel better? He asked. Actually, yeah. Good. But next time you want to hit someone, make it count. And make sure there's a better reason than hurt feelings. What do you mean? Kyle's grin was predatory. I mean, if you're going to play offense, you better make sure you win. And winning means hitting them where it actually hurts. I thought about that as I walked home through the empty streets. Ethan had been right about one thing. This was complicated, but not in the way he meant. It was complicated because I was just getting started. The boxing lessons started the next Monday. Keep your guard up, Kyle barked as I stumbled around the ring, sweat pouring down my face. You drop your left hand like that in a real fight, you're going to wake up next Tuesday. I'd forgotten how much I hated exercise. In college, I'd been decent at boxing. Not great, but good enough to hold my own in the campus club. 20 years of desk work had turned my muscles into suggestions and my stamina into a fond memory. But anger, I discovered, was an excellent motivator. Again, Kyle said, holding up the focus mitts. And this time, pretend I'm someone you actually want to hit. I threw a combination that would have made my college coach weep. Kyle caught the punches anyway and shook his head. You're thinking too much. Boxing isn't architecture, Lucas. You can't plan every move 3 steps ahead. Sometimes you just have to react. I don't react, I said, breathing hard. I plan. Yeah, well, your plan better include learning how to throw a proper punch, because word's getting around that you slapped Ethan like a disappointed grandmother. He was right. The story of my assault on Ethan had spread through town, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of looking tough, I'd managed to look petty and unstable. Vanessa's support network was having a field day with it, but I had other plans brewing. That afternoon, I made 3 phone calls from my office. The first was to Patricia Crawford, Ethan's wife of 12 years. The second was to Derek Hoffman, the owner of Premier Realty and Vanessa's boss. The third was to Julia Martinez, Vanessa's sister-in-law, who had never met a piece of gossip she couldn't improve with creative embellishment. Patricia Crawford answered on the second ring. Hello? Mrs. Crawford, this is Lucas Mitchell. I think we need to talk. There was a long pause. About what? About your husband and my wife, and about some photos I think you might find interesting. Another pause, longer this time. Where do you want to meet? Derek Hoffman was less receptive. Lucas, I'm not going to get involved in your personal problems, he said when I reached him at his office. What Vanessa does on her own time is her business. Even when she's using company resources to do it, company credit cards for hotel rooms, company car for personal meetings, I have receipts, Derek, lots of them. The line went quiet. Derek Hoffman hadn't built Premier Realty by ignoring potential liability issues. What exactly are you suggesting? He asked carefully. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just sharing information with a concerned business owner. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. Julia Martinez was the easiest call of all. She answered with her usual breathless enthusiasm. Lucas, oh my God, how are you holding up? This whole thing is just so crazy, and Vanessa is just devastated, and... Julia, I interrupted. I need a favor. Of course, anything. I need you to spread some gossip for me. The meeting with Patricia Crawford took place at a coffee shop across town, far from the usual Millbrook social circuits. She was a small, neat woman with tired eyes and the kind of careful composure that comes from years of practice. "How long have you known?" she asked after I'd shown her the photos. 3 weeks. How long have you suspected?" 6 months, maybe longer." She studied a picture of Ethan and Vanessa kissing outside the Marriott. "He's been working late a lot. New clients," he said. "Big deals that required evening meetings." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Are you? Or are you just angry enough to want company in your misery?" "Both, probably." "At least you're honest." She gathered up the photos and put them in her purse. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know." "Bullshit. You want something, or you wouldn't have called me. So what is it?" I liked Patricia Crawford. She was direct in a way that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Vanessa 15 years ago, before my wife had learned to weaponize charm and deploy strategic tears. "I want Ethan to understand that actions have consequences," I said. "And you think I'm going to help you with that?" "I think you're going to do whatever you think is best for you and your kids. I'm just providing information." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the parking lot where her minivan sat next to my pickup truck, 2 vehicles that told the story of our respective marriages. "He's been stealing from our joint account," she said finally. "Small amounts, but regular. I thought he was gambling or something." "Hotel rooms aren't cheap." "No, they're not." She stood up and slung her purse over her shoulder. "Thank you for the coffee, Lucas, and for the information." "What are you going to do?" Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm going to do what's best for me and my kids." The results of my phone calls started showing up by Wednesday. Derek Hoffman called Vanessa into his office for what he described as a routine review of expense reports. Julia Martinez started asking pointed questions about Vanessa's work schedule at the grocery store, the post office, and anywhere else she could find an audience. And Patricia Crawford filed for divorce, citing adultery and financial misconduct. By Friday, the narrative was shifting. Instead of being the unstable husband who'd publicly humiliated his innocent wife, I was becoming the wronged party who'd uncovered a web of deception and financial impropriety. The Vanessa support network was still active, but their talking points were getting harder to defend. "You're enjoying this," Kyle observed as we worked the heavy bag Friday evening. "Shouldn't I be?" "Depends. Are you trying to win, or are you trying to hurt people?" I stopped punching and looked at him. "What's the difference?" "Winners know when to stop. People who just want to hurt others, they keep going until they destroy themselves along with everyone else. Which one am I? That's what we're going to find out." That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the construction site on Elm Street. Midnight. Come alone." I stared at the message for a long time. It could be Ethan, looking for a confrontation away from witnesses. It could be Vanessa, ready to negotiate. It could be someone from her support network, planning to teach me a lesson about small-town justice, or it could be a trap. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. After 3 weeks of planning and plotting, I was ready for some direct action. The construction site was dark and empty, surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. I parked across the street and walked through a gap in the fencing, my footsteps echoing off the concrete foundation that would someday support a new office building. "Lucas." I turned and saw Samantha Torres stepping out of the shadows. She was alone, wearing jeans and a dark jacket, her usual real estate agent smile nowhere to be seen. "Samantha, this is unexpected." "Is it?" She moved closer, and I could see her face in the dim light from the street lamps. "You've been very busy this week. Phone calls, meetings, spreading information around town like seeds in a garden. Information wants to be free. Bullshit. Information wants to be weaponized, and you're very good at that." I studied her carefully. Samantha Torres had been one of Vanessa's most vocal supporters, organizing the Whisper campaign against me and coordinating the social isolation that had cost me 3 clients. But something had changed in her tone. "What do you want, Samantha?" "I want to make you an offer." "I'm listening." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. Photos, documents, financial records, everything you need to completely destroy Vanessa's reputation and career. I didn't take the envelope. "Why?" "Because she's been lying to me, too. About the extent of her relationship with Ethan, about the money she's been moving around, about a lot of things." "And you're upset about being lied to?" Samantha's laugh was bitter. "I'm upset about being used. Vanessa asked me to organize her friends against you, to spread rumors about your stability, to sabotage your business. She said it was necessary to protect herself from a dangerous husband." "But now you know better?" Now I know she's been playing games with everyone, including me. I still didn't take the envelope. What's in it? Proof that she's been embezzling from client escrow accounts. Proof that she's been having affairs with multiple clients, not just Ethan. Proof that she's been planning this divorce for months, moving money and assets where you can't touch them. The night air felt suddenly colder. How do you know all this? Because I helped her do some of it, before I realized what she was really up to. I finally took the envelope. It was heavier than I'd expected. Why bring this to me? I asked. Because you're going to destroy her anyway. I've been watching you work this week, and you're systematic. Patient, thorough. You're not going to stop until she's completely ruined. And you want to be on the winning side? I want to survive. And right now, that means making sure you don't have any reason to come after me next. Smart woman. Ruthless, but smart. What do you want in return? Immunity. When you use this information, you leave my name out of it. As far as anyone knows, you discovered all this on your own. I tucked the envelope inside my jacket. Deal. There's something else, she said as I turned to leave. What? Vanessa's planning something. She's been asking questions about your business, your assets, your clients. She's not just trying to win the divorce, she's trying to destroy you completely. Let her try. Samantha shook her head. You don't understand. She's not working alone anymore. She's hired help. What kind of help? The kind that doesn't care about the rules. I walked back to my truck with Samantha's envelope burning like a coal against my chest. The game was escalating, and the stakes were getting higher. But I'd been building toward this moment for weeks. It was time to find out who was the better architect. The annual Millbrook Children's Hospital Charity Gala was held every year at the high school gymnasium, transformed for one night into something resembling elegance through the liberal application of white tablecloths and dim lighting. It was the kind of event where everyone who mattered in our small city gathered to see and be seen, to write tax-deductible checks and pretend they cared about sick children. It was also the perfect venue for a public execution. I bought a table for 8 and invited 7 of the most influential gossips in town. Margaret Hoffman, who'd canceled my kitchen renovation project, Dr. Patricia Wells, who ran the hospital board, James Morrison, who owned the local newspaper, and 4 others who could spread a story faster than a computer virus. The invitation was simple. Join me for an evening of revelations and charity. Formal attire requested, discretion optional. They came because they couldn't resist. In a town like Millbrook, the promise of drama was more irresistible than free money. I spent the week before the gala preparing my presentation with the same attention to detail I brought to architectural projects. Samantha's envelope had contained a treasure trove of evidence. Bank records showing systematic embezzlement, email chains documenting affairs with 3 different clients, and a recorded phone conversation where Vanessa discussed her plan to take Lucas for everything he's worth. But the crown jewel was a series of text messages between Vanessa and someone identified only as M in her contacts. The messages detailed a plan to plant drugs in my truck and call in an anonymous tip to the police, destroying my reputation and giving Vanessa grounds for a restraining order. M turned out to be Marcus Webb, a private investigator with a flexible relationship to legal boundaries. Samantha had provided his full name and contact information, along with copies of Vanessa's payments to him. I was looking forward to sharing all of this with my dinner guests. The gala was in full swing when I arrived, fashionably late and carrying a leather portfolio that contained enough evidence to end several careers. The gymnasium had been decorated with white lights and flowing fabric, transforming it into something that almost looked elegant if you squinted. Vanessa was there, of course, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She was working the room like a politician, accepting condolences for her difficult situation, and playing the role of the wronged wife with Oscar-worthy conviction. Ethan was conspicuously absent. According to my sources, he was in the middle of his own divorce proceedings and had been suspended from Premier Realty pending an investigation into his expense reports. I found my table and greeted my guests, who were practically vibrating with anticipation. They'd come expecting a show, and I wasn't going to disappoint them. Ladies and gentlemen, I said as they took their seats, thank you for joining me tonight. I promise you an evening you'll never forget. Margaret Hoffman leaned forward eagerly. Lucas, you look wonderful. Much better than I expected, given everything you've been through. Thank you, Margaret. I've been learning to see challenges as opportunities. Dr. Wells raised her wine glass. To new beginnings, she said. To the truth, I countered. Dinner was served, and I made small talk while my guests grew increasingly impatient. They wanted drama, but I was making them work for it. Finally, as the dessert plates were being cleared, I stood up and tapped my wine glass with a fork. The sound carried across the gymnasium, and conversations gradually faded as people turned to look at our table. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. "I'd like to say a few words about charity and about the importance of truth in our community." Someone had dimmed the lights for the evening's program, and a spotlight found me as I walked toward the small stage where the hospital board usually made their fundraising pitch. "Many of you know that I've been going through a difficult time recently," I continued, climbing the steps to the stage. "My wife and I are divorcing, and there have been many rumors about the circumstances surrounding that decision." I could see Vanessa at her table near the front, her face pale in the stage lighting. She was shaking her head slightly as if she could somehow stop what was about to happen through sheer force of will. "Tonight, I want to set the record straight," I said, opening my portfolio, "because our community deserves to know the truth about the people they trust with their business, their secrets, and their money." I'd connected my laptop to the gymnasium's projection system earlier in the evening with the help of a maintenance worker who owed Kyle a favor. Now I clicked a button, and the first image appeared on the large screen behind me. A bank statement showing a transfer of $15,000 from a client escrow account to Vanessa's personal account. "This is a record of embezzlement," I said calmly. "Money that was supposed to be held in trust for a home purchase, instead diverted to fund a lifestyle that included expensive hotels, jewelry, and payments to a private investigator." The gymnasium had gone completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in the microphone. I clicked to the next slide, a series of text messages between Vanessa and a client named Robert Chen, discussing meeting times and locations that had nothing to do with real estate. "This is evidence of an affair with a married client," I continued. "One of several, as it turns out. My wife has been using her position as a real estate agent to identify and seduce wealthy married men, then blackmail them to keep their wives from finding out." Another click, the recorded phone conversation where Vanessa discussed her plan to destroy Lucas completely and take him for everything. And this is a conversation where she admits that our entire marriage was a business arrangement designed to give her access to my income and assets while she pursued other relationships. I could see people pulling out their phones, recording everything. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. By next week, it would be legend. But I wasn't done yet. The final slide was the text message chain between Vanessa and Marcus Webb, detailing their plan to frame me for drug possession. "And this," I said, "is conspiracy to commit a felony. My wife and her accomplice plan to plant illegal drugs in my vehicle and call in an anonymous tip to the police, destroying my reputation and giving her grounds for a restraining order that would prevent me from defending myself in divorce proceedings." The silence in the gymnasium was deafening. I could see Vanessa at her table, tears streaming down her face, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. "I'm sharing this information with you tonight because our community has the right to know when someone is systematically defrauding clients, manipulating friends, and conspiring to commit crimes," I said. "I've already provided copies of all this evidence to the police, the district attorney's office, and the state real estate commission." I closed my portfolio and walked down from the stage. The spotlight followed me as I made my way back to my table, where my dinner guests sat in stunned silence. "Thank you for your attention," I said into the microphone one last time. "And remember, always read the fine print." The exodus began immediately. People pushed back from their tables and headed for the exits, already pulling out phones to spread the news. Within minutes, the gymnasium was half empty. Vanessa hadn't moved from her table. She sat alone now, abandoned by her friends and supporters, staring at the empty screen where her secrets had been displayed for everyone to see. I walked over to her table and sat down in the chair next to her. "Hello, sweetheart," I said. She looked at me with eyes that were red from crying and bright with hatred. "You bastard," she whispered. "Actually, my parents were married when I was born. Unlike some people in this room, I have documentation to prove it. You've destroyed me. No, Vanessa, you destroyed yourself. I just provided the architectural drawings." She stood up abruptly, her chair falling backward. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, it is." She walked away without looking back, leaving me alone at her table with the wreckage of her reputation scattered around me like confetti. Kyle appeared at my elbow, grinning like a man who just watched his favorite team win the Super Bowl. "That," he said, "was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful." "Think it was enough?" "Brother, that wasn't enough. That was too much. That was nuclear warfare." He was right. I'd just ended Vanessa's career, destroyed her reputation, and guaranteed that she'd be facing criminal charges within the week. It was complete and total victory. So why didn't it feel like winning? "Come on," Kyle said. "Let me buy you a drink. You've earned it." We were walking toward the exit when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Parking garage. Level 3. Come alone, or your sister gets to see some very interesting photos. I showed the message to Kyle, who read it and swore under his breath. Looks like Vanessa's got one more card to play, he said. Looks like it. You want backup? I thought about it, then shook my head. This is my fight, but if I'm not back in an hour, call the police. Lucas, 1 hour, Kyle. I walked out into the night air, leaving the wreckage of the charity gala behind me. The parking garage was across the street from the school, a 3-story concrete structure that served the downtown business district during the day and became a ghost town after dark. I took the stairs to level 3, my footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. The garage was dimly lit and filled with shadows, perfect for an ambush or a final confrontation. I found them waiting by the far wall, Vanessa, still in her black dress, and a man I didn't recognize but assumed was Marcus Webb. He was tall and lean, with the kind of face that forgot itself the moment you looked away. Hello, Lucas, Vanessa said. Thank you for coming. Didn't seem like I had much choice. You always have choices. You just don't always like the options. Marcus Webb stepped forward, and I could see something metallic glinting in his hand. Not a gun? Something smaller. A syringe. Here's your new option, Vanessa said. You're going to call a press conference tomorrow and admit that everything you showed tonight was fabricated. You're going to confess to stalking me, to creating false evidence, and to having a complete psychological breakdown. And if I don't? Then Marcus here is going to inject you with a very interesting cocktail of drugs, and you're going to be found tomorrow morning in a very compromising position with some very illegal substances, along with some photographs that will make your little slideshow tonight look like a church newsletter. I looked at the syringe in Marcus's hand, then at Vanessa's face. Even now, even after everything that had happened, she was still playing games, still trying to manipulate and control and win. You know what your problem is, Vanessa? I said. What? You never learned the difference between being clever and being smart. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. It was displaying a live video feed from a camera I'd hidden in my jacket, a camera that had been recording everything since I'd walked into the parking garage. Smile, I said. You're live on Facebook. Vanessa's face went white. Marcus looked confused, then angry. You're bluffing, she said. Am I? Check your phone. I tagged you in the post. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and stared at the screen. I could see the exact moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. Her expression shifted from anger to desperation to something that might have been respect. Clever, she admitted. No, Vanessa. Smart. There's a difference. Marcus was backing toward the stairwell, clearly wanting no part of a situation that was being broadcast live to the internet. Vanessa watched him go without trying to stop him. So, what happens now? She asked. Now you leave town. Tonight. You disappear and you never come back. And if I don't? Then tomorrow morning, the police get an anonymous tip about a private investigator who's been planning to frame an innocent man for drug possession, along with video evidence of that plan being discussed. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating odds and options. Finally, she nodded. You win, she said. I always do. Eventually. She walked toward the stairwell, then stopped and looked back at me. For what it's worth, she said, you really were a good husband. I just wasn't a good wife. No, you weren't. She disappeared into the stairwell, and I was alone in the parking garage with my phone still recording and my heart still pounding. I ended the video feed and called Kyle. It's over, I said when he answered. You sure? I'm sure. I walked back down to street level and found Kyle waiting for me in the school parking lot, leaning against his truck and smoking a cigarette. How do you feel? He asked. I thought about it. Empty. That's normal. Revenge is like alcohol. It feels great going down, but the hangover's a hell. Think I did the right thing? I think you did what you had to do. Whether that's the same as the right thing? He shrugged. That's between you and your conscience. We stood there in the parking lot, watching the last few cars leave the school as the charity gala officially ended. In a few hours, the sun would come up on a new day, and I'd have to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. But for now, it was enough to know that I'd won. The architect of revenge had finished his masterpiece. 3 days after the charity gala, I was sitting in my office when Derek Hoffman called with news that Vanessa had been arrested trying to board a plane to Mexico City. She'd been carrying $50,000 in cash and a fake passport with the name Michelle Torres. Samantha's idea, apparently, Derek said. The passport, I mean. Turns out your wife's been planning this exit strategy for months. I wasn't surprised. Vanessa had always been a planner, just not a very good one.
She thought in terms of short-term gains and immediate gratification, while I preferred to build things that lasted. "What about Marcus Webb?" I asked. "Arrested yesterday. Turns out he's wanted in 3 states for similar schemes. The FBI is very interested in his client list. And Ethan? Fired, divorced, and facing embezzlement charges of his own. Patricia Crawford is taking him for everything he's worth, and she's using your evidence to do it. I should have felt satisfaction at this news, but mostly I just felt tired. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past month was finally wearing off, leaving behind something that might have been regret." "Derek," I said, "I need to ask you something." "Shoot. Did I go too far?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Derek Hoffman was a businessman first and a moralist second, but he'd known me for 15 years. "You want my honest opinion?" he asked finally. "Always. You destroyed her completely."
Career, reputation, freedom, all of it. She'll probably do 5 to 10 years in prison, assuming she doesn't cut a deal to testify against Marcus Webb. That's not what I asked. No, it's not. Another pause. Did she deserve it? Probably. Did you have the right to be the one who decided her punishment? That's a harder question. And your answer? My answer is that you're not a judge or a jury, Lucas. You're just a man who got hurt and decided to hurt back. Whether that makes you right or wrong, he sighed. That's above my pay grade. After Derek hung up, I sat in my office staring at the blueprints scattered across my drafting table. Half-finished projects, abandoned dreams, structures that would never be built. My business was slowly recovering. 3 clients had called this week to discuss new projects. But the damage to my reputation would take years to fully repair. The door to my office opened, and Kyle walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression he usually reserved for delivering bad news. "We need to talk," he said, setting one of the cups on my desk. "About what?" "About the fact that you've been sitting in this office for 3 days straight, drinking whiskey for breakfast and talking to yourself." "I don't talk to myself." "You were having a full conversation with your ex-wife when I walked in. She wasn't here, Lucas." I picked up the coffee and took a sip. It was terrible, which meant Kyle had made it himself instead of buying it from the diner down the street. "I'm fine," I said. "No, you're not. You're crashing, hard, and you need to do something about it before you end up like one of those guys who wins the lottery and blows it all on cocaine and bad investments." "I didn't win anything, Kyle. I just destroyed everything I used to care about." "Including yourself?" I looked at him over the rim of my coffee cup. Kyle had been my friend for 25 years, which meant he'd earned the right to ask uncomfortable questions. "Maybe," I admitted. "Then it's time to stop." "Stop what?" "Stop being the architect of revenge and start being the architect of whatever comes next." He was right, of course. The revenge was complete, the victory was total, and Vanessa was facing the consequences of her choices. But victories, I was learning, were like buildings. They were only as good as what you built on top of them. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "I suggest you get out of this office, take a shower, and remember what it feels like to be human. Then figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life." "And if I don't know?" "Then you start building something new. That's what architects do, right?" That afternoon, I drove out to the construction site on Elm Street, where Samantha had given me the evidence that had destroyed Vanessa's life. The foundation had been poured while I was planning my revenge, and the steel framework was starting to rise from the concrete like the skeleton of some massive beast. I stood there for an hour, watching the workers attach beam to beam, building something that would outlast all of us. It was honest work, creating instead of destroying, adding to the world instead of tearing it down. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I hope you're satisfied. You've destroyed an innocent woman's life based on lies and fabricated evidence. Vanessa never hurt anyone. You're a monster, and someday you'll get what you deserve." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. There would always be people who believed Vanessa's version of events, who saw me as the villain in a story where she was the victim. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was a monster. Or maybe I was just a man who'd learned to fight back. I drove home as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. That reminded me of the first time I'd brought Vanessa to this house, 15 years ago. She'd stood in the empty living room and talked about all the changes she wanted to make, all the ways we could improve on the architect's original vision. Now the house was empty again, echoing with memories and possibilities. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down at my drafting table, pushing aside the abandoned blueprints to make room for a clean sheet of paper. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't planning revenge or calculating odds or building elaborate schemes. I was just drawing. The design that emerged was simple, A small house, maybe 1,200 square feet, with clean lines and large windows that would let in plenty of natural light. It was the kind of house a single man might build for himself, a place to start over and figure out what came next. I worked until midnight, adding details and refining proportions, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of creation. When I finally set down my pencil, I had something that looked like hope sketched out in blue ink. My phone rang. It was Kyle. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Better, I think." "Good. Listen, I've got a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "My cousin Tony owns a construction company down in North Carolina. Beach town, nice weather, no one knows your name or your story. He needs an architect for a big residential development, and he's willing to pay well for someone with your skills." "You want me to leave town?" "I want you to have options. You can stay here and spend the next 5 years being the guy who destroyed his cheating wife, or you can go somewhere else and be whoever you want to be." I looked at the drawing on my desk, then at the empty house around me. "When does he need an answer?" "Next week." "I'll think about it." That's all I ask. After Kyle hung up, I walked through the empty rooms of my house, remembering 15 years of marriage and imagining what it might be like to start fresh somewhere else. The walls held too many memories, both good and bad, and maybe it was time to build something new. I went back to my drafting table and started sketching again, this time drawing a beach house with a wraparound porch and windows that faced the ocean. It was the kind of house where a man could sit in the morning with his coffee and watch the sun come up over the water, where the past was just something that happened to someone else. The revenge was complete. Vanessa was in jail, Ethan was ruined, and Marcus Webb was facing federal charges. I'd won every battle and destroyed every enemy. But victory, I was learning, was just another kind of ending, and I was ready to start building something new. The next morning, I called Kyle and told him to give his cousin my number. Then I called Derek Hoffman and told him I was closing my practice in Millbrook. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Somewhere with better weather and shorter memories?" "Think you'll be happy there?" "I think I'll find out." That afternoon, I put the house on the market and started packing 15 years of marriage into cardboard boxes. Most of it would go to charity or the dump. I was traveling light from now on. I found our wedding album in the bottom drawer of Vanessa's desk, and I sat on the floor of the empty living room, flipping through pictures of people who no longer existed. We'd looked so young, so hopeful, so certain that we were building something that would last forever. Maybe we were just building in the wrong location. I closed the